Informational items from 13.1.1, the budget calendar for 25-26. Kathy.
Thank you, Dr. Rauner. I'm actually going to turn this over to Dr. Standish after a brief introduction. We do a budget calendar every single year. It gives us a date and times of when we will talk about different parts of the budget. But more importantly than that, it gives our community an opportunity to know when to come and speak with us. The Finance Committee met on this last week, and I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Standish to give details.
Good evening. Tonight we present kind of the process and the calendar and some of the big parameters related to the school district budget development for the 25-26 school year. And we just want to go ahead and get started. We'll talk about the calendar. We also want to give early notice on community engagement and really talk to the community about the process we've put in place to kind of move that community engagement from the pink postcard, which is after the school year started, after all the hiring done, after the budget needs to be, and often within 2 weeks of the budget having to be filed, and talk to the community about the most beneficial place to engage. We also want to make sure, since our first work session is the end of June, that is actually in line with the homestead exemption filing deadlines. So we have a slide to kind of direct the community to where they can find resources on that. We have a few early preliminary budget factors, knowing we're still 3 months from our first work session, but we have a few of those factors that we could lay out tonight, and then a real quick legislative update on school finance legislation. So this document is not necessarily for all of us to go over and read tonight, but it's more just to exhibit the concept that we have a very extensive process that spans all throughout the year. We start in November, we're updating enrollment, we're talking about negotiations, knowing that negotiations is the single biggest factor on our budget growth from year to year, and we are continuing to work, monitor legislative bills, updating forecasting all the way through the winter. We actually have to make decisions about staffing conferences and class sizes and staffing for schools as an executive team, working through processes with schools in the spring months. So a lot of that has already occurred by this point. And then we gear up for June when we really initiate the preliminary proposed budget for the following year with the community, and we have a community engagement process for that. One thing the Finance Committee asked about was, how did it go last year? Which I think was a great question, because we did something a smidge different last year. We had our budget forums broadcast on Facebook Live, and then we opened up a window for a community member who may be viewed on Facebook, one of the budget forums or a part of a budget forum, where they could submit a question. So we were really trying to move to this format where people could engage in our budget process whatever time they like. You know, they could be watching TV at 9 o'clock at night, maybe watch a little clip of a video if it sparked a question. During that end of June, beginning of July timeline, they could then offer a question through the district website and get an answer posted, and that Q&A was available for the community. We had a great result. I think, as we all know, the world has kind of shifted from having to be in one place at one time to do one thing. So we had almost 2,000 views on Facebook where people engaged with the media that was out there, and then about 100 people that submitted questions through that Q&A process. So that was great news and a great report for the Finance Committee, and that really guided us to go ahead and replicate what we did last year since we had such great engagement. So we are here in March, and we've had state aid certified, so I have that number for you. That's based on current law. We're presenting the budget calendar tonight, and then we will turn around and have all of this published on our website after this evening. We will be working very hard between now and June as a team, the exec team, the Finance Committee, board member input, to work towards that preliminary proposed budget presentation the end of June. That will be at a public work session at 4:30. There's always opportunity for the public to come comment at the board meeting that follows that work session. We'll open that online input window on the 25th that I talked about, and then we'll have our forums, which will include a virtual forum at noon. That, once again, will be posted on Facebook, recorded. There's videos on the website, lots of ways for people to engage in that information, with an in-person public forum at 6. and then we will do a virtual public forum the following day at 6. So people can engage live if they want live Q&A and live feedback, or they could do it virtually and submit through the online input window. Now, as a board, all of you know, at some point, we have to make decisions and put together what really is that proposed budget. So we do close the online input window formally on July 11th. As you all know, I'm more than happy to talk to any community member anytime and answer questions about the budget. It's just kind of that formal gathering process close on July 11th. I'm happy to take calls and answer questions anytime, and I do on a regular and routine basis. July 22nd, we should really be kind of making some final decisions. At that point, we also are able to look more at all of the funds. The first work session, a lot of our energy is on the general fund. Of $1 billion budget, almost 600 million of it is the general fund, and that is the one that impacts classrooms and staffing the most, so that's where we focus our energy early. We are also going to, if necessary, that base growth limitation, which is a new third cap on school districts, because we have our levy cap, we have our budget cap, we have a base growth cap. We're going to look at July as a first reading, so we can forecast that into the community and get that taken care of as part of the budget process if that vote and that process is necessary based on where we land. There's always opportunity for public input at the board meeting attached to the work sessions. We will work through August, get school started, and we will have opportunity for public comment at those board meetings. We have a budget hearing August 25th, and then we have the board meeting where we would look at that base growth limitation and also have opportunity for public comment. Unfortunately, because of layering multiple legislative bills on top of each other and laws on top of each other, September gets a little confusing because we either have to have a property tax request hearing here at the Board of Education, which would happen on September 9th, or we participate in the county-wide, what's commonly referred to as the pink postcard hearing, and that would be somewhere between September 15th and September 18th. We genuinely do not get all the data that we need to submit the forms to participate in the countywide hearing or make those calculations till we get the information from the assessor in August. So at our August 26th board meeting, and at the budget hearing on August 25th, we will make sure to be very clear about how to participate in which hearing in September. It's just unfortunate it's become this complicated. It's not the Board of Education's doing. It is actually the legislature placing various caps and rules that we have to work through to get a budget adopted. So I just wanted to clarify that we wanted to make sure we really underscored that this year to make sure people understood which hearing would occur in September. We will have first reading on September 9th and budget adoption September 23rd, with the budget filing due September 30th. Once again, the time that we really want people to come and talk to us is during that June and July window. So the September hearings, the school year started, we're only 15 days away from actually filing the budget, but we want to make sure we're transparent in some of the different parameters we have to navigate as a school district. So that would be two different paths in the month of September, and we'll be really clear in the month of August which of those is occurring, whether it's the property tax request hearings here at the board meeting or whether it would be a countywide pink postcard hearing. Through our budget process, when you put together, all those months put together from June through September, there's 2 public work sessions, 3 public forums, 6 Board of Education meetings. There's an online input opportunity via the district website and 2 public hearings. So there is definitely a substantial amount of opportunity for the public to come and share with the Board of Education their thoughts and opinions about the preliminary proposed budget once we roll that out at the end of June. We keep the information available on our website. This is actually a screenshot from last year where you can see we had the work session available where people could watch the video straight on the website, and then they could go and submit a question or comment. And then I shared the question and comments also with the Board of Education through that process. We'd like to just remind the community that if you are a person who may be interested in the Homestead Exemption Act, that has a deadline in June. So once you get the pink postcard, it's too late. So just that would be something to check out, and we will have this website in this presentation on the district website if people have trouble finding that. If you go to the Department of Revenue and type in homestead exemption, it will also take you to the page. Nothing we're experts on, but just a resource we want to make sure the community is familiar with. It is a way to reduce your tax bill if you are over the age of 65 or have certain parameters. So that filing deadline is June 30th. And now we'll kind of shift over to, here's what we know today. It's very early. We're 3 months away from our preliminary proposed budget, and we, as we talked about in the milestone document, have a lot of work in front of us and a really strong process to do that work. So it's nothing we shy away from. It's just we have a long way to go. So one of the first things we do is we want to give the board just kind of a snapshot of the needs. We are a large school district, and so rolling forward from 1 year to the next year, if we don't do anything different for estimated, keep in mind, we're still in the process of negotiating with groups, but we're estimating almost $20 million increase just from salary and benefit increases alone. And so when you have the number of staff, when your budget is 90% staff, that is the biggest driver of need for when we're looking at funding a budget for next year. We also know that we grew 600 students this year, so we do have requests and needs related to staffing for that specific growth and funding the programs for students that have joined. We will know that we have programmatic changes, requests for additional programming coming up from departments. And keep in mind, these are just estimates at this point, but it's really important for us to say, okay, our budget doesn't just stay flat from year to year. You know, there are definite needs that come forward. So when we look at special education or transportation or investments in early childhood, and then operational budget needs, for example, increases in our property insurance for 8 million square feet of property. That goes up every year. When we look at various things across the district and various costs, and then there will be other district supports and needs that emerge through the process. So you can see there's about a $30 million number here. I mean, and I think that's just an idea of where we start our process and the hard work the board has and the finance committee and staff have in front of them as we go through it. I did want to provide an update on current law state aid because of that growth in students. And then last year, what keep in mind, was a little bit smaller of a valuation growth year. So the smaller valuation growth year, rising needs of students means that our state aid is going up. So our state aid, based on current law today, is projected to go up about $10 million. So that is certified. If there is not any further legislation throughout this legislative session, that will be our state aid number. There is a recalc process that happens, but that's more in the weeds and technical. So this would be our certified state aid. We also know that at this point, what we know about the valuation side is simply what was reported in the paper. We actually don't get what's called the abstract report until later in April. So we don't have any specific data related to what's happening with valuation just yet. So speaking of current law state aid, kind of the legislative update, the key bill that could bring change was introduced by Senator Hughes. Keeping in mind, right now we're operating off of Governor Pillen's education finance package, which was passed in 2023. So throughout 2024, nothing really passed that changed school finance. So some of the things related to property tax bills and income tax credits and all of that didn't necessarily touch the finances of the school district. So this legislative session, 2025, that we're currently in, Senator Hughes, at the request of the governor, introduced LB 303, and this bill was prioritized by Senator Hughes, which means if at some point they do feel there's sufficient funding to move forward with a school finance package, this would be the vehicle, because it does have that priority distinction. Right now, in its current form, LB 303, some of the key elements go into the formula and reduce the maximum levy, which increases the need for state aid. Most of the changes that are being proposed in state aid right now are to increase state aid with an effort to reduce property tax burden. It increases foundation aid and establishes a new levy. We have not heard much about LB 303. If you're following the forecasting board, there's not a feeling that there's a lot of resources at the state to fund additional investment, but we also know that it's March and the legislative session goes till June. So we haven't heard a lot of momentum about 303 so far, but just wanted to make sure all of you knew we're keeping a close eye on it. And then in closing, I work with an amazing team of people. You can imagine gathering all that input just to say, okay, here's our starting spot is a lot of work, and it is, and we still have a lot of work to go. So Kim Schmidt especially is the director of budget, and then Jess Jefferson, Doug Anderson, Julie, and April all helped to get this all done in that big milestone document that I showed you. So it's definitely a team effort, and it's a team effort with the board as well. So this is really kind of just the kickoff and how we're getting things started, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Kathy?
So let's see, it's the slide with the current state aid certification. I don't remember what number that was. That one. So one of the things that, over my years here, that my constituents have shared with me is they would like to see less up and down. That's not in the cards from where our current state law sits, is it?
No, the current state law, actually, the state aid formula reacts to what happens with property value. So when property values go up, state aid goes down. And actually, we had some conversation at the Finance Committee that the additional caps that have been placed on schools, we're working within them. I mean, I think we're working as hard as we can to meet the needs as best we can within them. But the most recent caps actually kind of move things around even more. So the idea that we would just kind of have this static, that's one thing that I would say always frustrates me when people say, well, the school district's revenue should just grow 2.5% a year. Well, we might grow 6% one year and 1% the next year, and then 4% and then -2%. And we have to find a way to smooth that out so that we're providing a stable education system for the community. So the systems that are put in by the state, Mrs. Danek, actually work counter to the idea that we would be able to just keep this steady. We have to navigate these big, huge swings and find a way to balance that.
And so for my constituents, yes, I already knew the answer, but I rarely ask when I don't already know the answer to. The reason I had you put this slide up is if you go up and look at 2022, 2023, our state aid was $114 million. In 23, 24, it was down $10 million. Then it went down $32 million the next year. So this year there's a $10 million increase, but we're still down from where we were 4 years ago significantly in state support, correct?
Correct, absolutely.
So we're trying to get there, but it's going to be a long road.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Property values, excuse me, are impacted by inflation, are they not?
Housing inflation absolutely would have a big impact on property values.
So inflation impacts every segment of our society, including the needs of our teachers and other staff to be able to take care of their own families. I just bring this up because I think it's really important that as we go and we look at this budget, and you mentioned it would be nice, and Mrs. Stanek mentioned this as well, that we just stay at a level like 2 or 3% from year to year for growth. But in reality, inflation is something that is out of our control, that impacts property values, it impacts housing costs, it impacts food costs, it impacts the needs of our staff. So there's really no way to absolutely predict a budget, is there?
Nope. Yep,
Just
absolutely.
wanted to clarify that because, you know, in a perfect world, that's what we would do. But it's not a perfect world, so we have to go and respond to what's happening in the economy.
Yep, absolutely, and our needs of students. So typically, we've looked at inflation even, and then growth on top of that. So we're experiencing both in this year, yes.
Yeah, and that brings up another really important point, and that is that we want our community to grow. because that's good for everybody. But with growth comes additional costs.
Correct, yep.
Piyush?
So on the federal level, they're going through the budget reconciliation process, and depending on the outcome of that, once we know it, could that impact our upcoming budget?
It would depend on the timing of the decisions about funding. We do have significant FTE in Lincoln Public Schools that are on federal funds. I know a lot of those awards are already done, and so it would come down to the process and the timing. I definitely do not want to create any fear for staff at this point in time. I think we're all in a wait-and-see mode, and we know this will roll through probably a multi-year process, but it would impact our funding if all of our federal funds, for example, did not exist. I don't know that we know that that's the world we're headed to, because none of us really know what to expect. So I want to say we are definitely wait and see. We are in, Lincoln Public Schools is in a strong fiscal position, and so I don't want to create any fear among staff either, so.
Thank you.
Kathy?
And I forgot to say this, but I'm joined on the Finance Committee by Piyush Srivastava and Annie Mumgard. And I just want to say thank you for all you've done. Number one, to make the budget more understandable. Dr. Standish, you aren't just an MBA, you're also a teacher, and you help us teach it better. So thank you.
Thank you. Yep, and we'll have more to come, but we have a lot of work to do before we come back. So we look forward to it.